All right, it's time to talk basketball. Who cares that it's the off season? Man, there's no off season for us. We're fans of the NBA, man. I'm Jose Salviati, editor at thepeachbasket.net. He's Steve Perciello, longtime high school basketball coach, educator, vice principal, and athletic director. And this is the 13 Rules Random NBA Thoughts podcast, the best 15 minutes of random NBA thoughts online anywhere. This is your first time listening. Thank you. Welcome. We're glad you found us. This podcast was born out of the content in Steve's Random NBA Thoughts articles, which he publishes weekly. Steve and I have exactly 15 minutes to discuss what's on his mind around the NBA. Today, we'll discuss his latest 13 Rules Random NBA Thoughts article, which focused on the NBA draft. There were some other NBA thoughts sprinkled, and we'll talk about those as well, but the focus is on the draft. Steve, you ready to talk basketball?
Hey, let's go.
Let's do this. I'm starting the clock now. All right. So we'll start with the draft, and we'll start with it'd be great if we could talk about the number one pick. It'd be great if we could talk about, a great player who just excelled in college and we're excited to see in the NBA. Instead, we're talking about a player who had a big scare at the start of his college career and didn't, really do what he was expected to do, but was still drafted. That player is Bronny James. Rich Paul said about his client that he would have been drafted if his name was John Smith. You said a few things about nepotism and about Bronny, but let me ask you that, Steve. If his name was John Smith, would Bronny James have been picked?
Well, I'm going to turn it back to you in a minute, but I'm going to say this. How many, first of all, I only saw him play once or twice on college, but how many players who averaged 4.8?
Yeah.
A little over 2 rebounds and a little over 2 assists per game get drafted and didn't start. I don't know if there's many that fit that category.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to ask you, you saw him play a little bit probably because you probably viewed some of those games. What do you think?
Yeah. Would he have been drafted if his name was John Smith is the question. I think, I think it's a greater likelihood that he wouldn't have been because, I mean, there's a medical scare there. I mean, you've got to take that into account. His health has got to come first. And if I'm an NBA GM, I take that into account. Then I look at the numbers. Now, watching him play, you absolutely see flashes, right, of who this guy could be. I see solid defense, which at that age you don't, right? You tend to see the highlights, right? When you watch, because I didn't see a game beginning to end, admittedly, and he's got a good shot, but then, hey, listen, I could put together a really decent 5-minute video, maybe not 5 minutes. I could maybe put together a decent 2-minute video. So, the question, would he have been drafted? Man, if his name was John Smith, I don't see it. Could he surprise us all? Sure, right? The work ethic his dad has shown over his career, and you figure he's going to do the same thing. And work ethic matters. But I don't know. I mean, I hope that answers your question. You went into a lot of detail about nepotism in the NBA, and really nepotism, period. Do you think it's a problem?
I wanted to go to there with. I think the problem and where I went on that is about agents. It appears, free agency we all believe in, and that's part of it. But then an agent gets involved, and naturally his first worry is his client. That takes away from a team, and then and let's use a 3rd or 4th year player who's playing for that big contract, the next contract. He's not worried about the wins and losses of the team. He's worried about about the points and all the other things that guy can do. And he's also worried about not getting playing time. He could be a negative influence to a team, that agent, through his player. I think something's missing when we're at the point where Rich Paul or any other agent has more power than the player, than the team, rather, the coach and the general manager. And I think that's where we are. And it's something we've got to think about. Again, I support free agency. There's no other way around it that an agent's going to be powerful. But when they begin to change the game, because we watch the game, we root for the laundry, we root for the wins, we root for all that. We're not concerned if it's Bronny James scoring 20 or one of your favorite players, Rui Hachimura, scoring 20. It doesn't matter. We just want to see that team win. And the agents now are playing a game where it's interfering in it.
Yeah, and you encapsulated it pretty well in your article when you said, and I'm quoting you now, do we even need to have a draft if agents can call the shots? And Daniel, who was one of the early writers with the Peach Basket, tweeted the same exact thing. What's the point of the draft if the agent can come up and say, listen, my client's going to go to Australia if you draft him? That is admittedly problematic. Listen, I think we're all hoping the best for Bronny, certainly health-wise and in his career. There's a lot of excitement about seeing him and his dad play basketball for the Lakers on the same team, in the same game. We're hoping that happens. I think it would be spectacularly special. But unless the dynamic changes with the Lakers, that might be the highlight of their season in 2024-25. And we're not going to go down that rabbit hole.
No,
Steve.
I'm not going near it. I think they have a fine team.
Instead, we're going to go on to topic number 2. You said the Knicks, after trading for Mikal Bridges, have 7 really good players and 1 great one. Is that enough to beat a team that you identified, without naming them, with 2 great players and 4 other really good ones? In other words, who's your favorite in the East after this trade? Has it changed?
I think Boston still is, but you don't know about injuries. The Knicks, depending on what Hartenstein does, they need a center. Mitchell Robinson's there, but they need somebody else. Robinson is, he gets hurt often and so on. The old adage here, 2 stars are better than 1. I think Bridges is a real good player, a good 3rd or 4th guy on a team. I think Anunoby is a good 4th guy on a team. When I look at it now, well, where's your second player? Where's your second best guy on a team? So I think the Knicks are good. I think injuries could change everything, but I look at it in a way that if everybody's healthy, I think Boston's still the favorite. And I think, Boston should win, although it won't be easy because the Knicks defend real well. And they're going to be better with the two guys they picked up this week defensively. The only thing I can look at and think about is Jalen Brunson is not a good defender. Teams are going to go at him. And it's a long season, and he's going to take a pounding because he's going to have to defend quite often with people with the ball. So that's the only negative I can see on the Knicks. They're good, and they'll be real good. So it's interesting. I think Boston still has an edge, but again, you don't know about injuries.
Do you have the Knicks at number 2, though, right now in the East?
Questionably.
Okay.
We have to see what Philadelphia does because they have a lot of money to spend. And we also see if the Bucks have been talking about trading Brook Lopez and things along that line. And then there's a wild card. You know what? If Orlando goes out and maybe gets Paul George, things change.
Could happen.
Things change because those guys are getting a year older and they just get better. Banchero's a player, and they will just continue to improve. And look out, the biggest thing they do need is outside shooting. Paul George isn't bad last I looked.
No, over 40% from 3, best season of his career, and that would be a major upgrade for the Magic, undeniably.
Yeah.
And incidentally, we're about 2-3 hours away from the start of the madness that might very well be the free agent season here in just a couple of hours. Let's shift back to the draft, right? You and I have talked a lot about the way the game has changed, right? We talked about, you and I in the past about how in the 80s, everybody played inside the 3-point line. If you watch a game, it's just staggering to see. Now everybody's outside of the 3-point line. The game's fundamentally changed. And the biggest, a casualty, maybe for lack of a better word, has been a traditional big, right? You've got to shoot threes in today's game. You said, right, if I had a great player today and he's a center, I'm going to teach him to shoot threes. You said that, I think, last week. Yeah. So Zach Edey gets picked by Memphis at number 9. This is a 7'4" guy, traditional big. He has shot 2 3-point shots in his 4-year career, made one, admittedly. He's a traditional big center. Does this signal that the era of the traditional centers isn't dead? Or is this just kind of an outlier? And listen, you got a 7'4" big. I need a center. I'm drafting this guy.
I think that was what I thought originally. A couple things came to light. I had heard something that Zach Edey, he was told by his coach, don't block shots because we need you on the court. In other words, unless we have to, because we don't want you fouling out, you go out.
Right.
That's interesting. So we don't know how good a shot blocker he is. That's an important piece.
Mm.
The other thing too, and I thought about this. Go back to the grind team in Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
Who was their big? It was Marc Gasol. Marc Gasol started shooting threes at the end of his career, but wasn't very good. Are they trying to replicate that or duplicate or whatever we want to use? But the point being, are they doing that? And if they are, Edey might be that person. If they put him in the post, Ja Morant needs room to operate, and that's going to take something away. That's the only two things I thought about, because I thought they might have wanted the Klingon, and he went earlier. So then because there were rumors during the week that they were going to trade Marcus Smart, or looking to trade Marcus Smart to get that pick. So, the thought being they wanted Klingon, and well, they didn't get Klingon, but they need a center. So what do you do? Then we go out and take the next center available.
Yeah.
And that so I'm torn trying to figure that one out.
Yeah. And I'm torn because I definitely want to get to the last point, but I got to ask you, you're a GM. Do you pick the best available player, or do you pick for your need? Because those aren't often the same player.
Simple answer. Let's go back about, 35 years, 40 years ago, whatever it is. There was a guy by the name of Jordan in the draft, and I think Portland didn't quite do that.
They had Clyde Drexler, man. They didn't need him.
And how did that work out? So that's my simple answer. Get the talent. No matter who it is, get the talent.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I 100% agree. Last topic, and I love this one. I'll go as quick as I can because we are running out of time. The shot clock is ticking. Is there anything more subjective than NBA salaries? You presented this scenario. Player 1, 30 years old, 10 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. Player 2, 27 years old, a couple years younger, 14 points, a couple more points, 4 rebounds, same rebounds, 2 assists, less assists. Player 1 is earning $10 million a year, while player 2 is earning $42 million a year. Now I got to ask you, and you can tell us who those players are. Does player 2 have a better agent, a more desperate team, or something? Or is it just subjective, man? What's going on here? Because that is crazy.
First of all, player 1 has 2 all defensive honors. Player 2 has 1, which is interesting. I think a couple things happened here. Let's look at it. Alex Caruso's player 1. Player 2 is Anunoby. Now, a couple things happened. First of all, Caruso was signed 3 years ago, or 3 or 4 years ago, and Anunoby was just signed. Television, and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of television money, but television money is going to be big. They have an agreement almost where they're going to make $6-7 billion. It's going to raise the salary cap extensively. So that $40 million in 3 years won't look like it does now. Don't forget, I think next year's projection is 141 million, and it's supposed to rise 10% every year. So now if you start doing the math without getting, you got a lot of money. You're over 200 million in 4 years. So 42 million doesn't look as bad because that's only a little more than a fifth of the overall cap. So in that way, yeah, but also the other piece we have to look at is the Knicks were in a bind. The Knicks traded Quickly, who signed a ridiculous contract also, but Quickly and Barrett. If they only got this guy for the end of the year and he was hurt, they have a problem. I mean, they're losing. They gave away 2 pretty good players for nothing. The other thing, and I did make the comparison, I want to emphasize this. Anunoby, I think he's averaging 52 games a year for the last 4 years, where Caruso's averaging 59, I believe. That's a big thing. If he's going to miss 30 games every year, you're paying a lot of money for somebody who's basically using up his vacation days because he's never there. And to me, it just all strikes me in a way, that's kind of crazy. The other and that's not to take away from the Knicks. They have a good team.
Right.
He will help them, but it's just crazy the money, and it just doesn't add up. I don't think it's agents as much as timing and trades and all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. We talked about this earlier, and I made the point that this is like OG just kind of hit the lottery, man. And AC Alex Caruso just hasn't been that fortunate, because when you look at their numbers, you look at their impact, you can make the argument that Alex Caruso, better player might be tough, but certainly as good a player, different types of players, right? But he just hasn't been as fortunate as OG.
Caruso can guard probably from one. I saw him guard Tatum during the season. So
Yeah.
1-4. Anunoby can guard anybody. The one thing I'll say about Anunoby, he doesn't have a great offensive game at all. He can shoot a three in the corner. You move him up, though, force him on the wings. It's even money, or not even money. It's not close to even money, but it's a lot worse. And then his when he goes to the basket, his footwork is just horrible, and he almost trips himself. He has a tough time shooting a layup on balance. Those are things I hope they fix it or work with him, and he can fix that. But that's limited type stuff. And it's just amazing that he's getting that. Caruso has displayed the ability to become a better shooter over the years. I think a couple of years ago with the Lakers, he wasn't good, but it doesn't make a lot of sense, I guess, is the answer.
Yeah. Yeah. End of the day, it's about luck of the draw. I think it's a little bit of everything, right? You got to have the right team, you got to have the right agent, you got to be the right place at the right time.
Timing.
Yeah, it's about timing. Yeah. But that's rough, especially when you look at those numbers. It's a hard pill to swallow if you are Alex Caruso or an Alex Caruso fan.
What would you think Anunoby should have gotten on the open market?
Yeah, I mean, and that's what makes it subjective and difficult. I mean, you can't, if you started making objective rules, right, and set boundaries, right? You need certain, this would be interesting, right? You need to have certain amount of time before you can make certain amount of salary. All right, 2 years, 4 years, 6 years. You get first team NBA, you can get this much. You get second team NBA, you get defensive player of the year, you can get this much. So if you made it objective, I think it would be absolutely interesting. But it would change everything, right? Because there's no good way to answer your question, because those rules don't exist here, right? Based on just the numbers alone, all you can do, it's kind of like, an appraiser who's looking at a house, right? Check comps, right? Who else is getting those numbers?
Right.
Who's, and what's the salary? That's what OG should be getting. But again, right time for OG, right team.
Who's better, he or Mikal Bridges? Who would you rather take on your team?
Yeah, but it's apples to oranges, man. Mikal Bridges is a better offensive player.
So who would you take?
I would take the better offensive player.
Yeah, and they're both really good defenders. Yeah. So, and Mikal, I think he's making about $24 million, if that. I'm not positive on that one, but if he's making that, this guy just hit for $42 million. Bridges, I think, got 2 more years on his contract. What will he be worth in 2 years?
Moral of the story, it's good to be OG Anunoby right now. But that's it. Our time is up. You heard the buzzer go off. Steve and I did what we tend to do. We violated the rules and kept talking. But we still are the best 50 minutes of random NBA talks online, give or take. Please make sure to read Steve's entire article. We'll link it below once this posts. You might be watching us live on Twitter or YouTube. If so, thank you. Make sure to add us so that we can get that article to you right away. Steve and I are during the off season excited to host a new show. We're calling it 13 Rules Overtime, where Steve dives into players that he actually got to see play that you may have heard of. I would say you definitely heard of, but you don't know a lot about. And the player we're discussing on the next Overtime show is the guy who has the second most NBA championships in NBA history to Bill Russell's 11, and that's his teammate, Sam Jones. Excited to learn more about Sam. I don't know anything about this guy, I'll be honest with you. So make sure to add us. We will likely be going live in the next 10-15 minutes to talk about Sam Jones in the 13 Rules Overtime show. But that's all for our show now. Thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. Please consider subscribing, liking, commenting. All that stuff just helps a ton. And make sure to join us again next week for another 13 Rules podcast. Steve, we'll talk then.
Take care.